3 of our Indology Festival, themed Harappan Civilization, A Century of Discovery. From the talks that we've had on the past 2 days, we are all aware of the fact that a defining moment was created in Indian history when the Harappan civilization was discovered and subsequently announced. In fact, when John Marshall, the then Director General of ASI, made this announcement in the Illustrated London News, in one moment, 3,000 years of missing Indian history was restored. In fact, to quote Marshall, our knowledge of Indian antiquities has up to the present taken us back no more than 2,500 years. Now, in a single moment, we have doubled that period and found that 5,000 years ago, the people of Sindh and Punjab were living in well-made cities. This newly found civilization was extremely unique in many, many ways. In the uniformly well laid out cities, in the fantastic variety and quality of their pottery, the standard size of their construction bricks, their standard weights and measures, the female figurines, the extensive seals and ceilings with a uniform script, evidence of long distance trade, absence of religious structures in their cities, so on and so forth. We have all gathered here today to commemorate the centenary of that above announcement and also to gain detailed knowledge from our expert speakers over the course of these 6 days. Most of our speakers have not only done extensive research and documentation about various aspects of the civilization, most of them have also undertaken first-hand field visits. In fact, many of them have led excavations to various sites of the Harappan civilization. To continue in this journey, we have 2 talks lined up for today. The first on Harappan seals and the second on Harappan settlements in Gujarat. Before we move on to the main program, I'd like to give you a brief introduction about Tamil Heritage Trust. Tamil Heritage Trust, as already mentioned, is an organization started by like-minded volunteers almost 14 years back. The main intent was to understand, appreciate, disseminate, and celebrate various aspects of Indian heritage and history, not just for the scholarly and the academia, but for the average public who may have a passion about the subject. Towards this end, Tamil Heritage Trust conducts various activities and events throughout the year. First among them are talks and seminars. We have monthly talks on the first and third Saturdays. The first Saturday talk is an online English talk, and the third Saturday is an in-person talk in Tamil. Then we have what we call as Pechu Kacheri or Oratory Concert in the month of December. As most of you may be aware, Chennai has its series of music concerts in December, and this Pechu Kacheri is meant to coincide and collaborate with that. Then we, of course, have the Indology Festival, and we are on the 3rd day of that. Tamil Heritage Trust also conducts various kinds of workshops to achieve their intent. We have one-day workshops called How to See a Temple, How to See a Museum, etc., where anybody can register. This is divided into 2 sessions. In the forenoon session, we have a series of lectures, and then in the afternoon, we practically take them to the site to discuss to show them what was discussed in the morning. Then we have some classroom sessions where we teach Grantham script, Asian Indian mathematics, ancient Indian mathematics, ancient Indian astronomy, and so on. We also have what we call Alamar Avai, which is basically aimed at school teachers of Tamil Nadu. Over a series of weekend sessions, various aspects of heritage and history are discussed with these people. The idea being they go back and disseminate this information to their students. Another important event that we have is called Site Seminar, which is usually undertaken in the month of January every year. This is an in-house event meant essentially for our own enhancement. We zero in on a particular site every year, and our volunteers for 3 to 4 months study various aspects of the site, and we have extensive in-house seminars. then taking all this knowledge with us, we go and study those sites and experience the environment, come back and try to document the same. THT has also constituted 2 awards to commemorate individual contributions in the field of heritage and history. The first is called the THT Professor Swaminathan Heritage Award, named after Professor Swaminathan, one of our co-founders. The second is called the Venkaiah Epigraphy Award, which is jointly constituted by the great-granddaughter of Venkaiah, the first epigraphist of India, and THT. We have a dedicated YouTube channel where you can find links to all our past talks, including the last 2 days' talks. You can subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon to receive notifications of future events. We have a website, and these are our social media handles. If you want to join our mailing list, you can mail us at this address. Last but not the least, as I already told you, Tamil Heritage Trust is a voluntary organization and we don't have any dedicated financial backing. So any kind of contributions are welcome, and anybody who wishes to do so can use this barcode at address to make their contributions. As I already mentioned, we have 2 talks by experts lined up for today. Our first talk for the day is by Dr. Gregg Jamison, who will be talking about the seals of the Indus tradition and what they tell about the people and cultures who made and used them. Seals are among the most well-known forms of material culture of the Indus tradition and have a long history of use in South Asia's ancient past. Inscribed seals made of fired stearite are diagnostic of the Indus civilization and its writing system, but represent only one of the many types used throughout the region for nearly 2,000 years. In his presentation, Dr. Jamison takes a longitudinal approach to investigate Indus tradition steel production and use. By applying multifaceted research methods, he aims to identify patterns and variability in steel production and use that are linked with larger social, economic, political, and ideological systems that reflect the people and cultures who made and used them. Dr. Jamison is an anthropological archaeologist whose primary research interests include the Indus Civilization of ancient South Asia, 2600 to 1900 BC, inscribed seal production and use, craft production, experimental and ethnoarchaeology, and the origins of cities and states. Currently an Associate Professor of Anthropology in the College of General Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, he teaches a variety of introductory and upper-level anthropology courses. He received his PhD in Anthropology, Archaeology section from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His recent publications have focused on multifaceted approaches to Indus seal production and use, with an emphasis on diachronic variation. Since 2018, he has also served as the lead archaeologist for the UWMIA Recovery and Identification Project, which aims to recover and repatriate the remains of missing American Armed Services personnel from World War II. He has also conducted archaeological fieldwork in India, Pakistan, Oman, Bahrain, France, Belgium, Poland, and throughout the midwestern United States. Welcome, Dr. Jamison.
Gauri, you can close the presentation. Share.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Gregg Jamison, and I am here this morning here for me in Wisconsin to talk to you about seals of the Indus tradition and what they tell us about the people and cultures who made and used them. Before proceeding, I would like to acknowledge all of the many institutions and individuals who have supported my research over the years, especially the Archaeological Survey of India in the Department of Archaeology and Ancient History at the MSU of Baroda. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues and friends, especially Akinori Uesugi, Marta Ameri, and other colleagues and mentors who have supported our research, especially Professor Jonathan Mark Kanoyer, Asko Parpola, Ajit Prasad, KK Ban, Rajesh SV, and the others listed here. And of course, finally, I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Tamil Heritage Trust for organizing this workshop and inviting me to participate. As many of you know, seals are important components of material culture from the Indus tradition. In our research, we use multifaceted approaches to build on earlier studies, specifically investigating or focusing on diachronic variation. Exploring this variation in seals is a useful method to investigate issues related to Indus integration, organization, and change over very long periods of time. All it takes is a cursory glance at a collection of seals from the Indus tradition, like those pictured on the image here, or on the images here, to recognize and understand that they are actually quite diverse. Our research aims to identify that variation and explain it. I'd also like to take a moment to define what I mean when I talk about seals, because oftentimes there is confusion in the literature and certainly in popular culture about what a seal actually is. For the purposes of our research, a seal is any object engraved intaglio with script and/or iconography, usually carved from soft stone and perforated. And it's this perforation that really helps distinguish seals from other types of inscribed materials, such as tablets, seal impressions, and sealings, primarily based on production, but also to a lesser extent, morphology. So you can see on the left of the screen examples of seals, and then toward the bottom of the screen, examples of related but distinct materials, including tablets, seal impressions, and sealings. There has been a tendency in the literature to describe Indus seals as uniform and highly standardized. And this begins during the earliest excavations at Mohenjo-Daro, where Sir John Marshall describes the seals from different levels are so alike in style, material, form, and technique that it is impractical to distinguish between them. This kind of attitude or interpretation about seals has continued throughout the decades and right into the present. And to a certain extent, Indus seals are somewhat standardized. Many of them, especially during the urban period, or what we call the Harappan Civilization, are made of fired steatite. They're usually square in shape, perforated, and contain the same compositional elements, usually a short inscription and some kind of animal iconography. Here is a very well-known example from Harappa with the so-called unicorn animal motif in a short inscription. The problem with this characterization is that it ignores or marginalizes variation at multiple scales that may reflect meaningful cultural practices, ideas, and beliefs in the past. Our approach to studying seals of the Indus tradition is multifaceted. We use complementary research methods to examine production, change over time, and what seals can tell us about Indus organization, integration, and how people and cultures living in this vast area deep in the past were related and integrated and exchanged ideas, goods, and beliefs together. Specifically, our investigations focus on typology, chronology. We've used ethno and experimental studies and formal and technological analyses of iconography and inscriptions. My primary interest has to do with production, and I leave to others, including Dr. Vahia, who I think will be presenting at this conference, this event later this week, on trying to decipher the Indus script. Currently, we have over 2,600 Indus seals from all phases and periods in our database. And we have identified 12 primary types that are distinguished by raw materials, morphology, iconography, and chronology. The typology that we have started our research with is crucial. It's absolutely necessary to manage and study nearly 2,000 years of seal production and use during the Indus tradition, which includes and spans the pre-urban, urban, and what we call post-urban periods in South Asia. So let me begin with a brief overview about seals of the different phases or periods of the Indus tradition that spans from about 3,500 to roughly 1,500 or so BCE. And I'll also mention that we do not have as tight of chronological control as we would like to. These are estimates. We know that seals were widely made and used during the urban period or the Harappan Civilization, but we don't know as much about seal production and use before and after that period. But we do have some data, and we have some important data from the pre-urban period, dating from about 3,500 to 2,600 BCE. We have so far identified 159 seals from 9 different sites associated with this period. Most of the seals during this period, as you can see, have geometric motifs, but there is a lot of variation in morphology and iconography, and we can see at the end of this period, the earliest appearance of seals with animal iconography and writing. At present, it is unclear what these different shapes and motifs mean, why there are so many different types almost from the beginning. But this variation collectively does suggest that perhaps production was developed and undertaken in different areas of the Indus region, even deep in the past. We have at present identified 2 broad groups of seals from this pre-urban period, what we call the northern region and the southern region. In the northern region, steatite is the dominant raw material. And there's a wider variety of iconography, including some of the earliest animal motifs that appear on seals. By contrast, in the southern region, which clusters roughly around the ancient site of Mehrgar and Kachi, we see more morphological variation. But even from this earliest phase, when we do have these 2 different broad groups, we can see connections between the 2 regions. So for example, at Mehrgar and a few other sites, there are examples of these fired steatite seals that generally appear more in the northern region, that appear in the southern region too. So even from the earliest phases, we can see evidence of interregional connections through the seals. When we map out the distribution of seals in these 2 groups, we can see that there are distinctive styles. That's really what these northern and southern groups are based upon. Now, I mentioned that there are some connections between the 2 regions, and I would also like to mention that there are some possible connections with at least iconography further to the west than what today is Iran. We need to further explore and investigate this, but what overall the data suggests is that even during the earliest phases of seal production in South Asia, we have evidence of variation and integration. And this is extremely important because it is a pattern that is established and continues throughout the urban period as well. And finally, and most significantly for our purposes, it is this early northern group that has the strongest similarities to the seals that become dominant during the urban period. The overwhelming majority of data regarding seals is assigned to the urban period, or what we normally describe as the Harappan Civilization, dating from about 2,600 to 1,900 BCE. Our database currently has nearly 2,500 seals assigned to this period from 42 different sites. And of course, this represents a much greater number and a lot more variation than either the pre or urban periods. Because of the greater number of seals assigned to this period and the greater variety or variation, it is seals of the urban period, or the ones associated with the Harappan civilization, that we have spent the most time studying and analyzing. One of the first things that we attempted to do when we started analyzing this large data set was to try to identify, classify, and interpret sources of variation. Because again, if you look on the image on the screen here, you can actually see that there are a variety of different types of seals. They're not all square fired steatite seals. Those are the most common type, but we actually have a wide variety of iconographic motifs, differences in morphology, and variation. We have identified 4 basic categories or types of this variation. The first includes morphology and iconography. Shapes are variable, as are the iconographic elements. We have also identified variable production methods and operational sequences. And a lot of the variation that we have focused on is associated with diachronic variation, change over time and across space. And then finally, at the smallest scale, we've identified variation in carving styles. So as I said at the beginning of this presentation, when we actually look at and start trying to systematically investigate this variation, we can see that it exists at multiple scales. And this is what I would like to spend the majority of the rest of my presentation talking about. Most Indus seals of the urban period or Harappan civilization are indeed square, like the one that you see pictured here on the left. But it is extremely important to understand and recognize that not all of them are. In fact, there are a fairly substantial number that are rectangular and only contain inscriptions, like the one you see pictured here, often described as either rectangular or long rectangular seals. We do have a couple significant examples of circular seals, including these 2 outstanding examples recovered from Dolavira, who I believe you already heard from the lead excavator, Dr. R.S. Bisht. We also have extremely rare examples of cylinder seal, like the one pictured here on the bottom right, which was recovered during the earliest excavations at Kalibanga. So even morphology is a very important but marginalized source of variation that oftentimes people don't talk about. When we look at the square seals made of fired steatite, we can also see that there are a lot of different iconographic themes. A wide variety of zoomorphic or animal motifs, many of which represent animals native to the South Asian subcontinent that are extremely distinct from similar materials and contemporary materials found elsewhere. I mentioned specifically here the tiger and the elephant, and of course the zebu bull. We've also got a wide variety of anthropomorphic figures, including the one on the bottom right here, geometric examples, some of which have their antecedents in the pre-urban period and continue all the way throughout the mature Harappan period and then into the late Harappan period. Some seals have narrative imagery, and some of them have none. Some of them have only inscriptions. So again, when we actually start to look at and examine these materials, we do recognize a wide variety of variation. And of course, we are not the first to identify and study this. It's been known for a long time. But very little attention has been paid to how these seals with different types of iconography would have been produced, if they were produced using similar methods or different ones. When we look at the distribution of seals during the mature Harappan period by their iconographic motifs, we can see different patterns. Now, some of this appears to be associated with regional and diachronic, patterns. The so-called unicorn motif is the most widely distributed. We find it distributed all throughout the ancient Indus culture area. But when we look at, say, for example, other motifs like the bison, that's got a much more restricted distribution. Only a few sites in the Indus culture area, and then also found outside of the Indus culture area in West Asia. A similar pattern with the zebu bowl. Now, when we look at this and start systematically investigating distribution patterns, we can correlate some of this with variation in the kinds of raw materials and production methods used to make seals during the mature Harappan period. During this period, most seals, as I mentioned earlier, were indeed made of fired steatite. And we know, thanks to the work of Dr. Randall Law, that there were multiple source areas where steatite would have been acquired during the Harappan civilization. Steatite occurs widely distributed throughout parts of South Asia. And we know, thanks to Dr. Randall Law's work, that a variety of sources could have been used, but there was a strong preference during the Indus period for northern deposits in what today is KPK. What I want to mention here and remind everybody of is that although fired steatite is the most common raw material, it is not the only one. We do have examples. They are rare, but we have examples of seals made of metal, usually either copper or silver, some of terracotta, and even some of faience during the Harappan period. When we start looking at unfired steatite debitage and discarded seals, we can see that Indus craftspeople used a wide variety of different types of steatite. You can see, even just by looking at these few images, that it came in a variety of different colors, textures, and a lot of different qualities. One of the most important aspects of what steatite was used to fashion seals appears to have been its ability to be transformed into a harder and lighter colored finished product. We don't know for sure what tools were used to carve Indus seals because, unfortunately, we don't have any stratigraphically excavated workshops. But we do have, from excavations, the recovery of multiple different types of tools that could have been used to produce seals, and they have been recovered from a variety of different sites, especially Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Lothal. Because we don't have stratigraphically excavated workshop areas or tools, we have really relied on experimental and ethnoarchaeological research to try to learn more about what kinds of tools would have been used to carve seals and how effective they would have been. These studies collectively suggest that multiple raw materials can be used to fashion seals, to carve seals, but those made of bronze work best, simply because bronze is a durable raw material that doesn't get dull. We also know now that different tips and edges are more effective for different kinds of carving tasks. For example, some of our ethnoarchaeological research and experimental research suggests that different kinds of tools make different kinds of cut marks and other signatures, and that these can be studied and examined microscopically. So you can see here on the left of the screen a series of replica seals that were made by professional stone carvers using tools made from different raw materials, including stone, shell, bronze, bone, and copper. And you can see examples of those replica tools, which were designed based on published examples from archaeological sites being used to carve the seals. And when you look at the replica seals, you can't tell just by looking at them whether a seal was carved with stone tools, bone, copper, shell, or bronze. But when you look microscopically at the cut marks made by those different tools, which is what you're seeing on the bottom of the screen here, we use a scanning electron microscope to investigate this. We can see that those different raw materials create very, very distinct engraved surfaces. And that's significant because it provides a baseline by which we can evaluate the tools that were used to engrave seals during the Harappan period, even if we don't have the tools themselves. We also know, largely through experimental research, that most steatite seals were fired and they became lightened in color. But we now know that the production methods, in other words, the process by which the steatite was fired and lightened in color, were variable. For example, we know now that some steatite, particularly from those northern regions in what today is northern Pakistan, will whiten through firing alone. You do not have to do anything else to the steatite. And just by the process of firing it, it will become much more durable, much harder, and the color will change. But we also know that other sources of steatite that the Harappans were using require additional treatment, surface treatment, to lighten it before firing. And we know that that could have been the application of a glaze or perhaps soaking it in an alkali bleach. Now, much of this research has already been done by Knoyer and Law. Our research contributes with additional experimental and archaeological analyses of seal production techniques. We have conducted static and dynamic firing experiments, which broadly support their results. You can see here on the left side of the screen a source of raw steatite from northern Pakistan was gray in color when it was unfired. And what we determined was that firing it in as little as 5 minutes at very, very high temperatures will transform that steatite so that it is completely white all the way through. That's what you see on the left of the screen here. But we've also conducted some experiments with steatite from Gujarat that will not transform its color by firing it alone. You have to bleach it. And by bleaching it using Sajikar, we were able to achieve a transformation in color, making it much, much lighter and more similar to what we find with the majority of Indus seals that were made of fired steatite. When we look at a collection of Indus seals, we can also determine that production methods in terms of firing and whitening were also variable. We can see that some seals were indeed surface treated before they were fired or after to make the steatite white. If you look in the upper left here, you can see some examples from Mohenjo-Daro where there is quite clearly a whitish glaze on the seals that over time has started or has worn away, started cracking, revealing a much darker brownish raw steatite or normal unfired steatite body underneath. So some of the seals clearly were surface treated before firing to make them white. Others, like the example from Bagasra here on the left side of the screen, were fired white all the way through. And we can see that when we look at the broken section of the seal. That one is largely fired all the way through. And then others appear to have only been whitened partially through, like another example here from Bagasra on the bottom right of the screen. And so what all of this suggests is that firing and whitening methods, which do appear to have been very important during the Harappan period, were another potential source of variation that we need to pay more attention to. We also know that operational sequences were variable during especially the Harappan period. Sometimes the inscriptions were carved first, as we can see here with examples, published examples from multiple sites, including Harappa and Lothal. But then in other instances, iconography was engraved prior to any inscriptions at all, which we can see here on the examples from Mohenjo-Daro, Chanhu-Daro, and Lothal. So operational sequences are variable, but we don't fully understand why. Why in some cases were the inscriptions carved first, and in other cases were the animals carved first. Now, it's important to note that most of these examples appear to have either been broken or discarded before being finished. So that suggests they might have been practice or trial pieces. They might have been ones in which people were learning how to carve seals. But even if that is the case, we can see that this aspect of production was not totally standardized. There is variation. And of course, even when we look at the iconography, as I mentioned earlier, some seals only have inscriptions, like the example here from Harappa. Others only have iconography. like the example here from Mohenjo-Daro. Most seals, at least during the mature Harappan period, only have inscriptions or engravings on their front face, their obverse face. But some of them actually have inscriptions or iconography on multiple surfaces. Look at this very famous socketed seal from the site of Bagasura, Goladoro, excavated and published by the MS University of Baroda. We can see it's got traditional or fairly common unicorn iconography and inscription on one face, but then it's also got these engravings on 3 of the other faces, and it's socketed. It's like a compartment in it. And then we also see other examples like the one from Harappa here, in which there are inscriptions on other faces of the seal. In this instance, it's on the back, on that knob or boss that would have been perforated. So again, all of this clearly demonstrates that operational sequences were not standard. The order in which things were carved and the process by which they were carved do not seem to have been standardized. And perhaps that's just because it wasn't how you got to the end product of making a seal that mattered. The steps, the order in which you did it was not as important as being able to successfully produce an Indus seal. So already we can see variation here at multiple scales. Morphology, raw materials, those are kind of larger scales. Operational sequences are at a different scale. And then some of the variation we can see associated with carving styles can be at a smaller scale. And this is best seen through the analyses of the so-called unicorn seals, simply because they are the most abundant at most Indus sites. Building on earlier studies by Kenoyer and Meadow at Harappa, we have classified broad changes in unicorn seals over time. We know now that the earliest unicorn seals, like styles 1A and 1B pictured on the screen here, have animals that are facing right in the original seals. They tend to have short inscriptions or not inscriptions at all, and they tend to be carved using very, very deep, broad, angular carving styles. We see over time a transition to left-facing animals, which dominate roughly from about 2400 BCE onward, to seals with left-facing animals, much, much longer inscriptions, and eventually the placement and orientation of the inscriptions become quite linear. So if you look at, say, for example, the seal pictured here from Harappa that says style 2BC, we see a left-facing animal with a very, very well-carved linear inscription. Compare that to the one we've labeled here 1A or 1B, and you can see that they are quite distinct stylistically. We can also investigate some of this variation in carving styles, not just visually, but using technological analyses of the engraved surfaces. And again, this is most successfully accomplished using a scanning electron microscope. This is a technique that has been used to study Indus craft production for nearly 30 years, originally pioneered by Professor Mark Kenoyer and Professor Massimo Vidale. So by making impressions of the seals using silicone, we can then investigate the carved surfaces of seals. We can investigate and study any cut marks left on those engraved surfaces. We can look at the edges. And when we start to do this and compare them, we can see that there is a lot of variation. Some of this probably has to do, again, with changes over time, but some of it also has to do with individual idiosyncratic carving styles. This work is still ongoing, and we are increasing the number and size of seal impressions for this kind of analysis. And what it really does is build on earlier studies by Kenoyer and others, but ultimately what we are trying to do is build a large comparative data set for future studies. As I mentioned, some of this variation has to do with diachronic change across time throughout the urban period or Harappan period and across space, different sites and regions. What we can see is that these early carving styles, what we would call style 1A, corresponding with the early Harappan period, are only present or have only been recovered from a few sites, primarily either in Punjab or Sindh, around the major core areas of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. But by the time we get to what we're defining as stylistic group number 2, after about 2400, 2450 BCE, we can see that they are widely distributed throughout the entire Indus culture area and even beyond. We have examples of unicorn seals from this period recovered at or from Shortugai in Afghanistan and at several sites in what today is Iraq, what in the past was Mesopotamian region. So there are a lot of sources of variation in unicorn seals. Morphology, production, operational sequences, and some diachronic. But it does not explain all of the variation that we can see. All it takes is a cursory glance at unicorn seals, and we can still see that the ways in which they were carved and decorated are variable. Look at these examples. Yes, they are all unicorn seals with inscriptions, but the ways in which they were carved and decorated are quite diverse. And one of the things that I have been interested in for a long time and focused on my dissertation research on is why this is the case. Why is there so much variation? Well, we know now that some of this variation is likely due to unique individual carving styles among the people who made Indus seals in the past. In other words, unicorn seal carving is like handwriting. Everybody does it a little bit differently, even when they're doing the same things. Now, this interpretation is based on ethnoarchaeological and my own experimental studies of Indus seal replication. I discovered very quickly when I tried to learn how to make seals myself about 15 years ago that I was not good at it. I would not have been a seal carver during the Indus Civilization. I'm not good at making much of anything other than dinner. So I quickly determined that it would be much more advantageous to work with professional steatite carvers who are more skilled at making seals. And so what I did was I worked with 3 of these professional steatite carvers in India. I had them do replica seals just with the unicorns, no inscriptions. And then I conducted stylistic and metric analyses to see if it was possible to fingerprint seals made by individual artisans. It was. There were clear, consistent, and pattern differences in the appearances and proportions of seals made by different artisans. And I used this to model and test for similar types of variation during the Indus period. The way that I reached this was to conduct formal stylistic and metric analyses of the animals and inscriptions often engraved and by definition always present on unicorn seals. Now, this I found to be a very useful technique for identifying not just variation, but patterns that I linked with different artisans and workshops that would have produced unicorn seals during the mature Harappan period. I selected a total of 11 discrete attributes of the unicorn motif, which you can see here on the bottom left: eye, ear, horn, halter, neck, tail, pizzle, legs, hooves, the so-called standard, and the head. And I chose these elements because they are discrete. It was possible to distinguish different types based on the number of strokes used to carve them, the particular operational sequence or process by which they would have been engraved, and their orientations. This was also supplemented with formal metric analyses of particularly the elements of the unicorn's body. And what I discovered when I first started doing this is that the overall dimensions, say, of a unicorn's body length versus width vary considerably based on the overall size of the seals. But the relationship between the two, that ratio, is much more dependent. And so that's what I ended up giving greater analytical weight towards. I applied these methods on a sample of 500 published unicorn seals from 22 different Indus sites. And then, using these methods of formal analysis, I tried to identify different stylistic groups. And the results of this yielded evidence of over 50 different stylistically defined unicorn seal groups with very, very complex distribution patterns. Of the 500 seals that I analyzed in my dissertation, nearly 180 of them were classified into these stylistic groups, most of which were from either Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, and small. Most of the groups had 5 seals or less. Looking at the distribution of these stylistic groups by subperiod using the Harappa seal chronology, determined that the unicorn seal groups I identified were classified based on their carving styles to all different subperiods of the Harappa phase. Now, because most of the seals I studied were recovered prior to the use of careful stratigraphic excavations, they didn't exist at that time, and not from reliably secure contexts that include radiocarbon dates, this is best seen as a provisional chronology. And the idea is hopefully this can be further tested as additional seals from more reliably stratigraphically controlled excavations are published. What we can see, though, even with this provisional chronology, is that the number of stylistic groups, total seals, and their distribution patterns increase and become significantly more complex over time. So during what I'm calling period 3A, we only have a few examples of seal groups with only a few seals. But by the time we get into period 3B and certainly 3C, there are a lot more stylistic groups and they are much more widely distributed. Some of the groups that I have identified are so stylistically and proportionally alike that they were probably carved by the same hands. Now, of course, I can't tell you if it was one person or if it was multiple people. We don't know. It's possible that one person might have carved all of these seals, or maybe one person carved the animal, one person carved the inscription. We can't distinguish that. But what we can determine, and hopefully you can see quite clearly, is that these 3 seals recovered during the original excavations at Harappa, and 2 of them found in the same archaeological context, are so stylistically and proportionally alike that I think they were probably carved by the same hands. Not only that, but the detail on these seals is absolutely outstanding. Look at how well the small, fine details of both the unicorn's body and the so-called standard were engraved and executed. Look at the quality of the inscriptions. All of the characters are very well spaced, placed in a nice linear alignment. My interpretation of this is that not only were these seals likely carved by the same hands, but they were likely carved by highly skilled craftspeople and artisans. On the other hand, some of the other unicorn seal groups that I identified are much more stylistically and proportionally variable, regardless of the size of the group or their distribution patterns. So you can see here, for example, on the top of the screen, this is one of the largest stylistic groups that I identified. It contains seals and fragments of unicorn seals recovered from a wide variety of different sites. And we can see very clear similarities in the ways in which the unicorn and the standard were decorated, but their proportions and particularly their inscriptions vary. We can see similar patterns with materials from other sites in which there are clear similarities in production methods, but also differences. including this example of a pair from Bagasura and Lotal, a collection of 4 seals from Lotal, and groups from Harappa and Kalibanga as well. Mapping out the distribution patterns of these stylistic seal groups reveals very complex patterns. Some of the stylistic groups of unicorn seals I identified have single site distributions, and these are primarily confined only to a few sites: Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Lotal. Others have multi-site distributions, which include seals from at least 2 sites in the same broad geographic region. Say, for example, Mohenjo-Daro and Shanhu-Daro, or Bagasura and Lotal in Gujarat. And then there are also examples of multi-regional distribution patterns in which the unicorn seals in the stylistic group were found from at least 2 sites in drastically different regions of the enormous Indus culture area. Say, for example, Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, and Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Dolavira. And what all of this suggests, when combined with all the evidence, including different raw materials, different operational sequences, different carving styles, is that during the mature Indus period or Harappan civilization, unicorn seals at least, production was decentralized. And what I mean by that is that the evidence does not suggest that unicorn seals were made and used only at one or a few sites. It's not just the big cities. And that tends to stand in stark contrast to what we can see with seal production at the same time, contemporarily, in ancient cultures located further to the west. Say, for example, ancient Egypt, and especially Mesopotamia. After I finished my dissertation, I decided I wanted to determine if these kind of similar patterns of stylistic groups, stylistic and metric coherence on multiple seals could be observed in animals with other kinds of motifs. And so I developed adopted the methods that I'd used to study unicorn seals and applied them to seals with other animal iconography. Best example I have here are tiger seals. So again, I broke the tiger down into different compositional elements. There were 10 of them that I selected, which are, again, they are discrete. I can easily distinguish between different types or styles based on number, morphology, orientation, so on and so forth. And then we also did the same metric analysis. You can see the attributes that I selected and chose. And what I found is that seals with other animal motifs are parallel in terms of pattern variation. So we've got a wide variety of different carving styles on different seals. You can take a look here at examples of tiger seals from the major sites of Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Dolavira. And we can see that the ways in which animals' head and ear were engraved and their proportions are quite distinct. But there are still examples of stylistically distinct seals that may have been carved by the same artisans and or workshops. Here's an excellent example of tiger seals from Mohenjo-Daro. We've got early seals from Banauli and Birana, examples from Mohenjo-Daro, Kalibanga, this very, very important pair from Dolavira that show composite animals, and then also other animals from multiple sites. This is significant. I did not expect to find this because there are, compared to unicorns, a much smaller number of seals with these different animal motifs. But the discovery of stylistically similar groups of seals with other animals, of course, supports my interpretations about how production was organized during the mature Harappan period. Only recently have I taken up an interest in the inscriptions And my interest in the inscriptions, as I mentioned earlier, is not concerned with trying to decipher the Indus script. I leave that to other scholars far more qualified than myself to investigate these issues. And I'm pleased to announce that there are a number of very, very important studies going on right now trying to decipher the Indus script using highly sophisticated computer models and methods that were not being applied when I first started studying Indus seals. It's a very good time to be studying Indus writing. But I leave that to others, as I said. My investigation or interest in the inscriptions has primarily focused on how they were carved and if there are duplicate inscriptions and patterns among those duplicate inscriptions. And I'm investigating this to try to see if I can find further evidence of integration and connections, if I can find pattern variations in carving styles that might link with some of the pattern variation that I've identified in animal iconography. There are thousands and thousands of known Indus inscriptions. In fact, I believe the number when you include all materials is approaching 5,000, maybe even more. But very few of them are duplicates. And it is unclear why that is the case. When we start mapping out and investigating these duplicate inscriptions, we can see that A, they show up on multiple different kinds of seals. So what we see here is a series of 6 seals that have the same basic inscription. 5 of them are on a unicorn seal. 1 of them is on a bison seal. And we can see that the carving styles are quite distinct. We also have a few exceptional examples of duplicate inscriptions showing up on multiple types of seals, including these examples here on the upper right. A couple examples of unicorn seals, and then 1 rectangular or long rectangular seal with the same inscription. We can also see very, very exceptional examples of duplicate seals, duplicate inscriptions on seals that were either finished or unfinished. And so even though the corpus of inscriptions, duplicate inscriptions is not very large, we can already see that it is present on seals from multiple sites and regions, and that there's variation in the medium, the type of seal it appears on, the morphology of the seal that it appears on, and the accompanying iconography or lack of iconography. I'm taking selected examples of these seals and using formal analysis to try to identify if there are any patterns associated with animals and inscriptions. So this is, again, primarily focusing on the proportions of the inscribed characters rather than the sequence or the meaning of the signs. And what I am finding is that some of the inscriptions that appear on stylistically similar seals in terms of their animal iconography demonstrate high levels of stylistic and metric coherence. So again, here is an example of the 2 tiger seals I referenced a few moments ago. The tigers are proportionally very, very similar. The ways in which they are carved and decorated are nearly identical, including the pattern of stripes on their bodies, clear similarities in their heads, legs, and claws. They have nearly duplicate inscriptions. In fact, there's only 1 character that varies. When you look at the proportions and carving styles of these inscribed characters, you can see that in this example, they are very similar, both in terms of their overall proportions and in their shapes. But if we take other stylistic groups, like say this one that includes seals from 3 different sites, look at the way that the shared characters on these inscriptions are engraved. They're very different, not only in terms of their proportions, but also in terms of their morphology. So what we can see is that some stylistic groups that have at least duplicate or shared characters in their inscriptions are highly standardized. They're very similar, like the example from the tiger seals here, and others are much more variable. Unfortunately, today it is very difficult to access seals themselves, and for very good reasons. Most of them are, they're all very old. A lot of them are fragmentary in nature. And so a lot of the work we're doing right now is using published photographs, especially from the corpus of Indus seals and inscriptions. Because of the difficulty in accessing actual seals, we're also moving on now to investigate seals of the post-urban period. But before I move on to that, I should also mention that while the majority of interest and focus on seals of the urban period has indeed focused on those with the writing system, it's important to note that seals with geometric motifs are also widely produced and used throughout the urban period. It's not just the inscribed ones with the writing system. We do have numerous examples of seals during the urban period that continue to have no writing, no animal iconography. They have geometric motifs. And these are extremely significant because some of them demonstrate clear and strong continuities with iconography from the pre-urban and post-urban traditions. In other words, some of the motifs on these geometric seals that we see during the urban period also appear during the pre-urban and post-urban periods. The coexistence of these geometric and animal seals during the Harappan period, mature Harappan period, are often ignored. Most people don't really talk about them very much. But the fact that both are produced at the same broad time, and that the ways in which they were produced, their sizes, shapes, raw materials, all together provide further evidence of the diverse, complex nature of seal production and use during the urban period. We're also starting to shift our attention to focusing on seals of the post-urban period. Although at the end of the mature Harappan period, around 1900 BCE, Indus seals with inscriptions and animal iconography disappear, that does not mean that seal production ends. In fact, it continues. It's just based on current archaeological excavations, very, very limited. We have a few numbers from primarily sites in two broad regions, Baluchistan and Sindh. Only about 50 now. I should have changed that number. And they don't have clear evidence of, there is no evidence that they're any longer inscribed. They're not making seals anymore that have Indus writing on it. But what they are making is seals with a variety of these geometric motifs, some of which, as I mentioned, occur and appear nearly 2,000 years earlier when seal production first started during the pre-urban period. The disappearance of seals with animal motifs and inscriptions does support a period of decline and transformation that Knoyer and others have been talking about for a very long time. What we want to emphasize here is that even though there are a lot less seals in the archaeological record from the post-urban period, it's only about 50 of them, there's still clear evidence of variation. We can see that variation in raw materials. We can see that in morphology. We can see it in iconography. Even though we've only got about 50 of them, there's different types. And that we think is significant. We can also see very, very limited but important evidence of intercultural connections that continue after the urban period that provide further evidence of these continuities with the urban period. So, for example, we know that during the mature Harappan period, Indus people were involved in very, very wide-scale, long-distance, interregional exchange networks. We find seals in the Arabian Gulf region. We find them at sites in Mesopotamia, along with pottery and ornaments. Well, we can see some evidence of connections and continuities even in the post-urban period. Look at these Gulf-type seals that we can see here. The one on the right is not a great image, but this is a seal recovered from Bahrain. Now look at this seal on the left, recovered from Dolavira, assigned to the post-urban period. Very, very clear similarities in iconography here. And this is something that scholars have really only quite recently, in the last 10 or 15 years, started investigating. We think it's worth further investigation to try to understand these continuities that occur between the urban and post-urban periods. So we have a number of future research goals. We are currently conducting statistical analyses to try to more systematically identify and map this variation in Indus seals, specifically unicorn seals. It's the largest data set we have. We continue to conduct technological analyses to try to identify more patterns in carving styles and techniques, again, using those impressions, which are completely non-destructive and create a duplicate record of seal iconography and inscriptions in case there's future loss or damage. We're trying to expand our database as new materials are published or we get access to additional materials, and are actually in the process of trying to write a book specifically about Indus seals. It's been a very long time since that's happened. So coming back to the title of my talk, what seal production and use can tell us about the people and cultures of the ancient Indus tradition, I think that first of all, we need to understand and recognize and appreciate more fully that seal production took place for a very long period of time during what we call the ancient Indus tradition, about 2,000 years. And within this nearly 2,000 year time frame, there are many different kinds of seals that were made and used in different places, in different regions. The ancient Indus culture area is absolutely enormous. It's larger than any other ancient culture area anywhere in the world at the time. It is truly a remarkable feat that people living in such diverse places, separated by such considerable distances, were clearly integrated and interacting with each other. But they're doing things in different ways. There is a lot of variation, and I hope it is more clear now that this variation can actually be seen at multiple scales. We can see variation at broad scales, chronological. We can see variation at intermediate scales, for example, regional variation. And then we can see variation at smaller scales, what I would call local or site-based patterns of variation. And then, of course, the finest scale that we can see that variation is at the individual level, unique idiosyncratic carving styles. And so we need to first recognize and acknowledge that seal production and use were incredibly diverse. And some of this is to be expected. It would be foolhardy to think that everything was the same over a period of nearly 2,000 years. There is going to be a lot of variation. What we need to do is now try to link that variation with the people and cultures who made and used seals during the Indus tradition. First of all, I would argue that the diversity and variation of seals demonstrates that they were made and used for many different purposes. Not all seals were made and used in the same way. And this suggests that the Indus people and cultures who made them and used them were diverse. Different groups of people made seals for different reasons. Having said that, at least during the mature Harappan period, these fairly standard forms, especially unicorn seals that are widely distributed, suggest that there was a shared knowledge of how to make and use seals. There might have been many, many different people involved in producing unicorn seals. In fact, I'm quite confident there were. And they were living in very, very different places. But they were all connected, and there was a shared sense of how an Indus seal is supposed to be made, what the production methods are. And this is very unique and distinct from what we see in contemporary ancient cultures in West Asia and Egypt. People were clearly integrated across considerable time and space. And this is something that we have known and argued for a long time and is supported by other types of material culture. So there's a great variety of people living in different places, drastically different environments, but at least during the mature Harappan period, they were integrated. And we think that that integration was accomplished through a variety of different ways. Most importantly, probably exchange, economic exchange, trading exchange, and then, of course, some level of shared ideas and beliefs. Seals were made and used in the Indus region for a very long time. Collectively, they are diverse, and it is important and useful to use a multifaceted approach to help identify, explain, and interpret this variation. This, in turn, helps us understand organization and changes over long periods of time and into social, political, economic, and ideological systems. Such studies are necessary to advance our awareness and interpretations of one of the world's earliest and most unique urban societies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Jamison. Do you want to close the presentation so that we can?
Of course.
Yeah. My first reaction, I mean, all this is new information. You seem to have presented a lot, but still I am unable to, get something absolutely concrete. And I think a lot of questions have come, starting with, what is the function of the seal? What does it mean? Why is it there? Do you have any conjectures? Forget about, absolutely, thoroughly confident answer, because you have been working with, I think probably you will start dreaming seals in your sleep. What do you think they represent? Why are they even there?
So that's a very good question, and you are correct in your observation. I always try to be sure to be tentative in my interpretations. We don't have this all figured out, not by a long shot. It's pretty clear, though, that at least during the mature Harappan period, some seals were being used as stamps. And we know that because we have sealings, that would have been, the seals would have been pressed into softer, wet clay, and then they would have been used to seal something. And then we also have some examples of seal impressions. So we know that at least some of them were used for that purpose. I think it's also safe to assume that some of them were used for narrative purposes. They were used to tell stories. They were used to, tell stories and share ideas and beliefs. And it's also been argued by others that some kinds of seals, particularly during the second half of the Harappan period, would have been used almost as like a proto form of currency. That they would have been used those with different animals like unicorns, zebu bulls, etc., would have been used to represent different groups, different clans, perhaps. So I guess my short answer to the question is I think they were used for a lot of different purposes. When we look at seal production and use in other ancient cultures and the origins of seals, it almost always associated with administrative activities and behaviors. And certainly, I think some Indus seals were used for those purposes as well. But I don't think that all of them were. I
That's
think
the
that
only purpose. So
right.
there must be many other purposes, as you indicated.
Many of
Exactly.
these seals seem to have a handle at the back, though. What is that? Something like a handle or a socket at the back. What's that?
Yep. So that's another very good question. What we call the some people call it the boss or the knob on the back of the seals, particularly those square seals with the inscriptions and the animals. It's been argued that those were used perhaps for suspension because a lot of those knobs are perforated, they're drilled. And the way that they are drilled is actually into the main part of the seal, not just straight through that knob. And so the idea is that by doing that, you could put some kind of a cord through it that would allow somebody to carry them around. And then the knob is also very useful to hold on to when you want to use the seals as a stamp. Yeah. And I should mention there's actually been some very interesting and significant research on how the ways in which those knobs or bosses were made. They also change over time. And some of that variation appears to correlate with changes in the ways that the animals and inscriptions are carved over time. So
I
my
have another very
suggestion-
basic question. Sorry.
No, no
Are all
problem.
these seals only one-sided, or do many of them have impressions on both the sides? That
Most of
was not
them
very clear.
only, yeah, most of them it's only on one side. There are a few examples on multiple or different sides, and we actually see a lot more multiple sided ones with the tablets. But again, as I mentioned, the tablets are they're similar to and related to seals, but they're not the same thing. So, for example, with the tablets, we have examples that had 3 or 4 sides which were engraved. And those are some of the ones that some people have argued might have been some kind of currency or tokens, something like that.
You indicated, it's a question that Gandhi Gopinath also asks, that the presence of perforation, and even now you indicated that, to constitute a seal, does it have to have perforations?
According to our definition, and not everybody would agree with this, but according to our definition, my definition and my colleagues that I work most closely with, yeah, I mean, that is one of the things that some kind of perforation, that is one of the things that distinguishes a seal, say, from a tablet. Tablets are not perforated. They tend to be smaller, different shape, and not perforated. The seals, the way that we define and study them, they do need to have that perforation. And so most commonly with the square ones, with the animals and the inscriptions, that perforation it's on that knob on the back. But there are also others that are perforated, particularly rectangular seals. They're perforated lengthwise through the body of the seal. So the knob is the most common type, but it's certainly not the only type.
Okay. And the other thing that you talked about, which is that there could be narrative panels conveying a story. And Alan George, has a question there. Says, do we have any ideas of what some of the narrative motifs represent? Some imageries like a figure emerging from a tree, 2 men pointing a spear at, against each other with the women amidst. Do they have any similarities with myth from contemporary societies? Also, with the growing trend to identify Harappans with Vedic culture, do we have any harsh motifs on seals or an explanation for their absence?
That's a very good question, and I will state that it goes beyond my expertise. I'm sure you gathered my interest is primarily in how they were made and then that variation. But what I can say is that other people who have studied and written about this have argued that some of those narrative scenes that we seal probably do represent either religious and ideological beliefs. Some people have argued that they do have similarities with later Vedic traditions. Others would probably disagree with that. One thing I will say, because I have been a little bit involved in some research on this more recently, is that a number of these narrative scenes appear to have scenes in which anthropomorphic figures, so humans, deities, I can't tell you what, they seem to be engaging with dangerous animals, specifically tigers. And so there's a very famous seal in which some kind of an anthropomorphic figure, it's been argued some kind of a deity, is actually holding at bay with their hands 2 tigers. And there are parallels with that imagery with what we see in ancient Mesopotamia. The difference is that with the Indus versions, it's a local animal, the tiger, that appears. And there are other narrative scenes in which, some kind of an anthropomorphic figure, a person or a deity, appears to be engaging either in conversation or some kind of interaction with tigers. We're not quite sure why the tiger appears, at least in terms of animals, frequently on these kinds of scenes, but it certainly does. And we see it in a variety of different scenes, and on a variety of different types of objects. And so one of the ideas is that, you know, one of these themes is the mastery or the taming of wild and dangerous animals. That probably has something to do with ideology or religion, but what, I can't say.
It's something similar to an origin myth. Maybe they have a hero who founded the civilization or a city, like, for Rome. Somebody who has done this and is commemorated, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly one of the suggestions that's been proposed. Yes. I mean,
and
I think that surely some of them, some of these narrative seals, and it's not just seals with these narrative themes. We see it on tablets. We see it on sometimes we see it on painted pottery. I mean, I think and it's widely distributed. We see it in multiple sites and regions. So, you know, what specific beliefs lie behind that, we can't say. We don't know because we can't read the writing. But what we can say is that, you know, during the mature Harappan period, at least, these kinds of themes, which represent obviously clearly important ideas and beliefs, they are widely distributed. And it's not only at the major sites. We see them and find them at smaller sites too. I think that's important because it demonstrates further evidence of this integration that I'm talking about. Connections between people living in very, very different places.
Yeah, actually, another question I had. The unicorn always comes with a stand, is it? Across
Yes.
everywhere. That is another strange thing, no? Like unicorn and the stand seem, inseparable, actually. So,
Yeah, so
what he calls as a standard.
yeah, standard.
Yep. So it is fairly remarkable that it only shows up with the unicorn. When we see other animals, they tend to have other kinds of features. Like for the tigers, you know, it's what we call a trough. Same with some of the other ones. Now, there are examples of unicorn seals that do not have the standard, but most of them do. And I'm not familiar with, at least not off the top of my head, that standard showing up on any other type of Indus seal. Now, and people have been studying this for a long time, including the late Dr. Mahadevan. And some people have argued that might represent some kind of a soma press. We don't know what it means, but it was clearly an important part of the unicorn seal because it does indeed show up on most of them. And the ways in which it is engraved and, you know, the proportions, I didn't have time to mention this, but that's actually the most diverse part of the unicorn seal iconography. There are so many different ways that people would engrave and carve those.
No, you said it's also available in tablets. It's available in some pottery. But do they come also with the inscribed characters or only the imagery?
So most of the time, the narrative scenes on the tablets, it's only the narrative scenes because the tablets are much, much smaller. And it's the same with on the pottery. When we see these kinds of scenes, it's normally just painted on pottery. With seals, we see sometimes these narrative scenes do occur with you know, some kind of a short inscription, but in other cases they don't. In other cases, it's just the scene. And again, we don't fully understand why that is. I mean, you would think, and it would be very, very useful for us if we could clearly identify these narrative scenes showing up only on a certain kind of seal and with the same kinds of inscriptions, but we don't see that.
On the unicorn, Pratika has a question. All animals except the unicorn are clearly identifiable. Except the unicorn. Has there been enough research to trace back unicorn-like animals in the region or any regions where trade occurred? Some scientists suggest a more rhinoceros-looking possibility, but these look clearly like horses with horns and not like they describe.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So some people have argued that the unicorn has its source in West Asia. Other people argue that the unicorn is actually supposed to be some kind of a bull or rhino. It's just shown in profile. My opinion is that the unicorn is a clearly distinct animal from other animals because two reasons. First of all, we have other animals that have two horns, even if their bodies are shown in profile. So, for example, the bison, the gaur, the water buffalo, the zebu. These are all two-horned animals.
Yeah.
And when they're on seals and they're painted on pottery, you can see the two horns.
Yeah.
So I firmly believe that this was meant to be a single-horned animal. There's also support for that interpretation in a small number. It's not a lot, but we do have some terracotta figurines that show an animal with one horn as opposed to two horns. So I think that what we call the unicorn is meant to represent a single-horned animal, and it is the earliest representation anywhere in the world that I am aware of.
Yeah. Okay.
People have tried for a long time to try to figure out what the animal is. We don't know. I mean, again, I think it pretty clearly had a significant, it's representing something very significant and important and widely shared because it is so abundant. You know, 70% of seals with animals and inscriptions are of the unicorn. Whatever it was clearly important, and it is the earliest representation anywhere in the world. It shows up in other cultures later on, but we're talking about much later in history. It's another one of the earliest things in history that comes from the Indus culture region. So
okay.
I wish I could tell you more about it. I wish you would be able to find, it'd be great if we could find some unicorn remains, but I think it's representing some kind of belief that was widely shared.
Honestly, even if we found a unicorn, a fossil, it is still not solving the problem. As in, what is the importance of this? Why is it so important? Why so many of them? What is its position in their narrative? We don't know.
No, but at least we will know that we had a unicorn-like animal in their midst. No,
well,
that itself we don't know. I mean, we don't know whether it's a mythical or real. Like,
I don't think that alone is the question here. The questions are much more. In fact, you mentioned that new seals are not, you're not getting newer content, and even some of the older ones you only have, they are degrading, and you have only images that you are you have to analyze. There is a question from the channel where they're asking what is the kind of fresh findings. Of course, it's from the speculatory front. What kind of fresh finding will help you to definitively conclude one way or the other on all these things, actually, right? What are we looking for? What are we looking for?
That's a great question. So, if we're talking hypothetical here, I can tell you that my greatest hope would be to go or have somebody conducting new excavations in which they could find seals or even seal manufacturing debris in a sealed archaeological context. In other words, it's an original archaeological context. It hasn't been disturbed. It's not a secondary deposit, and there would be dating evidence in there. The problem is generally when we find seals archaeologically, they're either in secondary deposits, they broke and got thrown away, or they're buried in somebody's house, and we don't always get great dating evidence. There are a number of studies still, people are still excavating it into sites, which is great. But what I would like to see would be, it would be great if we could just get good dating evidence to support our tentative hypothesis about how they change over time. I don't know if and when that's going to happen, but that's at the top of my wish list. I hope that happens. And I see that Rajesh is on the call right now, so I hope Rajesh is going to be the one to do that, and he's going to tell me right away.
Right. Thank you for An absolutely fascinating lecture. In fact, I never could realize that so much can be gleaned, especially about the kind of material that could have been used to create the seal on state aid. That you can actually look at similar scratches, find out various material, compare. So much that you can gain with simple experiments. It's absolutely wonderful. From very simple experiments to electron microscope way of looking at it, getting few artists to actually create
Yeah,
it.
I think the most fascinating thing was that it's like handwriting. I mean, actually,
Correct.
that's very basic, but it never struck us till now that if two
Correct.
people were to carve a seal, obviously the two would be different, It's
Correct.
so very
These
basic, like,
the,
yeah.
the thing is, to an untrained eye, our first reaction is that they are all looking alike.
Yeah.
But when you were really, when you pointed out that there are so many variations, and then it dawns on you that obviously it has to be because they are happening over a very, very large time frame and over a very wide geographical. So space and time being so different, how can it be? This was one question that I asked yesterday. But despite all of that, well, our scripts have changed. The Roman script has changed over time. The Brahmi script has changed and has given birth to so many scripts, all in a few hundred-year period. There is actually remarkable consistency. And that is another question that, let's keep it as a final question. Gandhi Gopinath asked, if the mature Harappan phase was one of integration, does it show in the archaeological record in terms of reduced variety and increased standardization of the kind of seals?
That is a really, really outstanding question. And at the risk of sounding like a politician, the answer is yes and no. So, but by the end of what we call the Harappan period, others who have studied the script more extensively than I have would say that, at least on the seals, what we see is the square seals with the animals is what we see is those inscriptions are being placed right at the top of the seal. They are almost always very linear. They're very, very easy to see. And even when you're just using photographs, as long as the seal is preserved, it's usually not difficult to identify the different characters. And and this is where some of the people who argue that the seals are so uniform and standardized, that's largely what that observation is based on. It's another unicorn with a standard and a very, very clear, well engraved linear inscription. And I should also mention that there are far more duplicate inscriptions when we start looking at the tablets. They have a much greater quantity and range of duplicate inscriptions. And so, yes, I would say, especially in the second half of the mature Harappan period, we do get some standardization. And I mentioned briefly at the end, now we're starting to see that some of these duplicate inscriptions are showing up on different kinds of seals at different sites. So certainly there is some of that standardization. But having said that, the total number of duplicate inscriptions is still comparatively quite small. And it really seems that, sometimes I think and worry that I'm overthinking this, that I'm investigating things on such a small scale to try to find these patterns, and they might not have mattered at all to the Indus people. In other words, it probably didn't matter what the seal looked like as long as you had a seal, right? So I think that the methods by which we are trying to study seals, especially at this very, very small scale, they're useful and important to identify patterns and to try to explain more of this variation. But I also fully recognize that some of the patterns that we see might not have been very significant or meaningful to the Indus people. I mean, if seals are being made, even within the mature Harappan period, they're being made for 700-900 years. maybe it doesn't matter who makes it. Maybe it doesn't matter how good they are at carving it, as long as they are making a seal and they can get it. So, it's important to keep in mind, and this is something that I always try to remember. It's important to keep in mind the limitations of the study. When we don't have writing that we can read, and when we don't have solid, reliable archaeological context for all the materials we want to study, we need to be aware of the limitations, and I always try to do that. I should also say, and you'll learn more about this with one of your other speakers, I think that now we are probably closer than we've ever been to trying to understand the structure of the script. And in large part, that is being driven by South Asian Indian scholars that are now applying brand new methods to the study of Indus writing. So I'm hoping that, within my lifetime, and maybe in hopefully in fairly short order, with the aid of new technologies, we'll be able to crack that code. And that obviously would be the best thing that could ever happen to those of us who study the Indus.
Certainly. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really an excellent, absolutely excellent lecture. And
thank you.
So much of information, like really fantastic.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Over to you to introduce the next speaker.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Coming on to the second talk for the day, we have Dr. Rajesh to talk about Gujarat, a Harappan hub. Harappan research over 94 years in Gujarat in Western India has proven to be highly productive, yielding unexpected insights, new ideas, and lasting results regarding the cultures and traditions of the various phases of the Harappan culture. Dr. Rajesh will discuss the outcomes of different explorations and excavations conducted in Gujarat between 1930 and 2024. The primary aim of this presentation is to elucidate the origin, existence, characteristic features, extent and dispersal of the Harappan and regional Chalcolithic cultures and traditions in Gujarat in a summarized manner. Additionally, it aims to identify the similarities and differences between the regional Chalcolithic cultures and the Sindhi Sorath Harappans in Gujarat. The goal is to understand the roles played by these communities from the early Harappan phase through the mature Harappan phase to the late Harappan phase. Dr. Rajesh's research interests include Indus Civilization, field archaeology, artifact analysis, ancient technology, thanatology, origin and development of urbanism in Southeast Asia, and megalithic Iron Age archaeology. Currently an assistant professor in the Department of Archaeology, University of Kerala, Dr. Rajesh received his doctoral degree from the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda, Gujarat, for his work, A Comprehensive Study of the Regional Chalcolithic Cultures of Gujarat. Along with being the editor of the journal, Heritage Journal of Multidisciplinary Studies in Archaeology, he has published more than 95 research articles in journals and edited several books. He has participated in several excavations and explorations in India and abroad. He is currently directing a multidisciplinary archaeological research project entitled Archaeological Excavations and Explorations at Junakhatia in Gujarat. Over to you, Dr. Rajesh. A warm welcome from all of us.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening. Is it visible? Yes. The title of my presentation is Exploring the Indus Civilization, a Journey Across Gujarat's Archaeological Landscape. First of all, I am thankful to the organizers of this conference, especially Dr. Kishore Mahadevan, Mr. Shamsi Raman, Mr. Badri Sheshadri, and Ms. Gauri H. And also, I am thankful to my co-directors of the project, Dr. Aben GS, Dr. Juanjo Garcia Granero, Dr. Francis Conesa, Dr. Subhash Bandari, and also the team members of the project. I am also thankful to my teachers and who are always inspirational for me, like Professor Ajit Prasad, Professor K. Krishnan, Professor J.M. Kanoyer, Professor Ravi Korsetter, Professor V.H. Sonavane, Dr. V.N. Prabhagar, Professor K.K. Bhan, Mr. Y.S. Rawat, etc. And I am also thankful to many institutions who supported my research and other villages in Gujarat also. So as all of us know, there are 4 major old world civilizations, and in that, Indus Civilization is the biggest one as area-wise, and it covered an area of 1 million square kilometers, and it incorporated means almost 6 major regions, and the southern region of the same is Gujarat. Gujarat can be divided into 4 sub-regions like Kutch, North Gujarat, Saurashtra, and South Gujarat. Among that, Kutch is more arid, and North Gujarat is almost the same, and South Gujarat is the most fertile valley. While talking about the research in Harappan archaeological research in Gujarat, it has a history of around 94 years, starting from 1930. And in the beginning stage, it was like period of chance findings, because majority of the sites were accidental discoveries. Then there were after the independence, majority of the sites went to Pakistan, and due to that nationalism-driven surveys done by Archaeological Survey of India, resulted in the discovery of sites like Lotha. Then in 1961, in between 1961 to 70, there were many foreign schools entered into the research field of Gujarat. Then in 1970s, in the 1970s, 80s, majority of the surveys were mainly district surveys to identify the archaeological sites, and they were mainly done by the scholars from the Maharaja Sajirao University of Baroda. And 1981 to 1990 can be called as the introduction, the period of the introduction of grid surveys. And in 1991 to 2000 can be called as a period for the survey for regional chalcolithic sites and the introduction of GPS surveys. And all these sites, majority of these researchers were geared by the Department of Archaeology, MS University of Baroda. And the period between 2001 to 2010, there were mainly the beginning of digital documentation, transect survey of sites, and the a wide range of use of GIS techniques were also there. Then the period onwards after 2011 can be called as the period of Gujarat Gazetteer project. In that means all the previously reported sites were re-recorded, and then there are the projects like landscape and environmental approaches were also okay. Now such projects are going on there. So all these studies resulted in the discovery of around 800 sites in different parts of Gujarat, and some of them have majority of them have a lot of regional chalcolithic features too. And in that, around 65 sites were excavated into various degrees. And among the 800 sites, I will talk about a few sites briefly. And the 5th largest city of the Indus Civilization is Dholavira. It is located in the Khadir island of Kutch. And this site was excavated by Dr. R.S. Bisht of Archaeological Survey of India in between 1989 to 2005. The site is very important in as far as considering the water management system, etc. Another important site is Lothal. Lothal is located in Ahmedabad district, and it was excavated by Dr. S.R. Rao in between 1954 to 1962. And this site also yielded very good evidence for the trade relations with foreign countries. Another site is Surkotada, located in Sanwa village in Kutch district. And this site was excavated in 1972 by Dr. J.P. Joshi of Archaeological Survey of India. It is a small site having 1.1 hectare in size. Another one is Kanmer. The site was excavated by a joint team of Rajasthan Vidyapith, Gujarat State Archaeology Department, and Research Institute for Humanities and Nature, Japan. And the site has a cultural deposit of around 10 meters, and in that 4 meters belongs to lowermost 4 meter belong to the Harappan culture. And this site has also a size of around 4 hectares. Another site is Kundasi. Kundasi was excavated in 1990s by Deccan College Pune under Professor Dhavalikar. And this site has more material remains of Surat Harappan nature. Nageshwar is a site excavated in 1984 by MS University of Baroda, and this site has very good evidence for the production of shell ladles and mainly the shell working evidences are got from that site. Bagasra is an industrial site excavated in between 1996 to 2005 by MS University of Baroda, and this small site having a size of 1.92 hectare revealed evidence for shell working, stone bead manufacturing, copper working, and blade production. Sikarpur is another site excavated by MS University of Baroda in between 2008 to 2013. And this site has a size of around 5 hectares, and it has an inner fortification and an outer fortification. And this site also revealed evidence for many craft activities. Navinal is a site located in Mundra Taluka of Kutch district, and it is a Surat Harappan kind of site, revealing very good evidence for shell working, copper working, pottery production, and stone blade manufacture. Based on the data derived from all these excavated sites and the relative dates from the explored sites, the Gujarat can be dated between 3900 BC to 1000 BC. So it can be divided into 3 periods as regionalization era or early Harappan, datable between 3900 to 2600 BC, then the integration era, 2600 to 1900 BC, and the localization era, or the late Harappan between 1900 to 1000 BC. And these sites in this time period, apart from the classical Harappan or the Harappan things, there were a lot of regional chalcolithic cultures or traditions existed in Gujarat. There had been some kind of relations with these classic Harappans, and means the kind of if we look very closely, we can find that many of them are related in one way or other way. And means among them, another tradition can be dated from, that's the oldest one getting from Gujarat, and it can be dated from 3900 to 1700. And we in the southern border, when we comes, we have the in the lowest time period in Jorwe, where we are getting from 2 or 3 sites, and it can be dated from 1500 to 1000 BC. So first of all, I will talk about the regional chalcolithic tradition. There is another tradition that was existing in Gujarat in between 1900 BC to 1700 BC. And it was mainly this kind of Anartha ceramics are mainly found in North Gujarat region, and it got its name from the traditional name of North Gujarat, that is Anartha. And around 75 sites were reported from mainly from North Gujarat and Kutch region. And Anartha sites are the first Anartha pottery was reported from the site Surkotada by J.P. Joshi. From there, he got Gritti Radware. In 1985, when MS University was excavating at Nagwada, they got the Anartha ceramics from that site also. In 1990s, MS University excavated the site Loteshwar, and that site revealed evidence for the independent existence of Anartha pottery. And here means in the lowest level was Mesolithic, and it was followed by Mesolithic or Microlithic level, and it was followed by the Chalcolithic occupation. And here majority of the Chalcolithic materials are getting from the pits, bell-shaped pits. Here one second I will show. Here, this one pit is there. Here you can see this is also another pit.
What happened?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's not moving. Yeah.
It's moving.
Yeah. So from the side, we also got the ceramics known as Gritti redware, then burnished redware, burnished greyware, and Then some black and red ware and such slipware pottery. And this pottery means the paintings are totally different from the other kinds of pottery reported. And now means okay, when you compare the ceramics, they have similarity to the some similarities to some of the ceramics reported from the Haryana region. And when it comes to the urban Harappan phase, in this lot of painting, the number of paintings in this kind of ceramics are increasing. Then other ornaments kinds like bangles, terracotta beads, lapis lazuli beads, and a few shell beads, then bone points, very few copper objects, then terracotta objects, especially very rare and unique kind of human figurines, animal figurine, then some stone tools devoid of any crystal grading technique or the rock-riched blades were also found. Then household objects like pallet stone and grinding stones, mainly showing the kind of food processing activities were also found. Then 2 burials were reported from that site in the excavations, and one of the burial belonged to a Mesolithic context, and the Chalcolithic burial is the child burial, and the burial is devoid of any burial goods. When our team were exploring the site in 2016, we actually found 2 burials at the site. Actually, they were exposed due to the agricultural activities, and in one of the skeletal remains, along with that, we found around 200 corner shell beads, and in another one, along with the skull, we were able to discover around 9 dendalium shells. And the faunal remains included both domesticated and wild animals from the site, and a few fish remains were also got from the site. Now, another regional Chalcolithic system that belonged to a period of 3,800 to 1,700 BC is known as Padri, where it was reported from Padri Gohilini in Talaja Taluka of Bhavnagar district. The site was excavated, the Padri site was excavated by Professor V. Shinde of Deccan College, and the site has revealed evidence for some brick structures made of probably of a early Harappan period, and also some platforms belong to that period. The site has revealed materials belonging to urban Harappan and late Harappan phases, and both Anartha kind of vessels, then Sorath Harappan and late Sorath Harappan kind of. That is, Sorath Harappan is a regional variety of ceramics got from the Saurashtra region, and that kind of ceramics were also got from the site. Then another important find from Gujarat is the unique kind of ceramics got along with a burial from Surkotada, and the C14 date of the burial is between 3,350 BC. It is a kind of very crude variety of black and red ware, and it was associated with one human skeleton outside the fortification, outside the fencing. And this the problem with this pottery is that similar kind of pottery was not reported from any of the Harappan or related regional Chalcolithic cultural sites in the Indus region. Another ceramic, black and red ware is another ceramic ware that starts from somewhere around 3,350 to 1,000 BC. Though I am saying that 1,000 BC, it is the limit of the Chalcolithic. Even we are getting black and red ware in the medieval period in Gujarat. It is around 13th, 14th century. We are getting it at the site Vatnagar. So, from the site Nagwada, the site has revealed different black and red ware with white paintings. The Surkotada revealed black and red ware, and this when we are getting black and red ware, they were it always showed the features of the associated pot. And here you can see some of the black and red ware. It looks like more like a technique adopted by the Chalcolithic people at that time. So when it was seeing along with the lesser red ware, it has more features closer to the lesser red ware. When it was found associated with the Sorath, it has similar kind of feature. When it was found along with the pre-Prabhas, it has almost similar kind of feature. Then another ceramic type is pre-Prabhas assemblage that can be dated from 3,300 to 2,600 BC. It was first reported from the site Prabhaspatan in Somnath in somewhere in 1956. 1955-56 by Professor Sibbarao. Later, this is a similar kind of pottery and associated materials were got from sites like Datrana and Jena in Kutch. So here you can see the photographs of the sites Somnath, Datrana, and Jena. And at the site means here also means the majority of the chalcolithic materials were found above the Mesolithic or Microlithic occupation. Here almost less than 1 meter deposit was found at the site. And the most important feature about the site is even within an area of 4 by 4 meter square meter area, we were able to find around 129 kilograms animal bones and thousands of stone. I think it is around 10,000 stone blades and around 7,000 stone tools and 65,000 lithic depth. It shows that the site was intensively occupied during the pre-urban Harappan phase, mainly, and also large-scale stone blade production was happening at that site. The kind of pottery getting at the site is very rudimentary kind, and some of the pottery of this tradition probably continued in the later period in the Surat Harappan in the wheel-made format, and also some shapes were also changed. And these wheels means another feature of this pottery is it is totally devoid of any Harappan, any kind of paintings. And this at the side Datrana, from the middle of the occupation, we can find some of the early Harappan kind of ceramics along with that. And the early Harappan type ceramics, some of the ceramics were like wheel made, and also the blades, stone blades found at the site, were more like some cluster-rich blades were also we are getting, and also getting some rock-rich blades. Then another feature is that from the platform regeneration or core trimming flakes, they made beads, disc beads. And also here at the site revealed evidence for stone blade production in the form of copper punches, and also evidence for stone drilling in the form of drill bits also. Another ceramic tradition we are getting at Gujarat is pre-urban Harappan type ceramics, and it is calling it by its name because this kind of ceramics were getting in the southern Balochistan region mainly, and it can be dated from circa 3,200 to 2,600 BC. And it was first reported from the site. Actually, it was reported from Surkotada, and later this kind of ceramics were reported during the excavations at Nagwada, Vaharvatimbo, Motipipli, Shantili, etc. in North Gujarat. And recently in between somewhere around 2018, the MS University of Baroda excavated the site Dhaneti, and this site revealed has around 43 burials, and in that some of the burials are very unique because they have the cane. These burials are cane packing of around 15 meters. And when you remove the cane packing, there were stone slabs, and when you remove that, they were able to find some 1 or 2 skeletons, and also in some pits there were around 60 vessels. And most interesting feature associated with these burials, there were some shell bangles and beads were there. These shell bangles had some similarities to the beads from shell bangles from Shakutum of early Harappan phase. Then from the site Chandili, a double burial was found, and it was also associated with the pre-urban Harappan kind of ceramics. This is one of the ceramics. Then another important site where we are doing the excavation is known as Junakhatia. Junakhatia is a site which was discovered in 2016 by the University of Kerala. And here our excavations, it is a 16-hectare site, and we are expecting more than 500 burials at the site. And in that, in 3 seasons, we excavated 4 localities. Locality 1, locality 2, locality 3, and locality 4. In all these localities together, we excavated around 197 burials. And in these burials, some of them had burial structures, some of them were in pits, some were represented by cluster of pottery, some had a cluster of stones. Then some of the burials were without any indicators, some had a cluster of shell bangles. So total there were 190, we were able to excavate 197 burials. And in majority of the burials, the skeletons were in highly damaged condition, and in some burials we were able to recover traces of skeletons, and in some cases we were able to get only burial goods, and some were devoid of any burial goods or anything. And these burial structures were very unique, and means they are totally different from any of the burials. Majority of them are totally different from any of the burials reported till date, and some of them had pavements, and some of them had even the stones, kind of construction techniques or the materials, the sandstone and shale, though they used, they differ. And the size of the burial were also varied. The burial goods the number of burial goods were also varying. Here also, I mean, some of the graves had a size of around 6.9 meters in length and a breadth of 2.4 meter, including the inner space. And here means one burial had a step kind of feature to enter into the burial. And here also you can see some of the very big boulders were using, and also in one burial you can see two hands having one having 16 bangles and another having 3 bangles. And here means only some traces of the skull portion and a few bones were there. Then one of the graves from the site has some similarities to the grave reported from the site Dholavira. And some of the graves, one of the graves had in the pit, there were pavement of soil from outside, because that is very clear there. And there were burials for children also, means there were small burials, mean for children having, some of them have very small vessels, and in some cases big vessels were also used. And there was a very narrow kind of burial. The exact purpose of that burial is not very sure, because there were nothing inside. Probably there was some, if they get any bones, they might have been gone. Then in some cases there was a few heaps of stones were there. When we removed, there was a stone slab, and when we removed it, below that only a few vessels were found. And some other burials here you can see. Again, so in another case, a few stones were kept in slanting position. Below that, there were vessels. In some vessels, we can see vessels. There were small vessels inside them. And another burial having 3 slabs, and it is very much similar to the burial we got from the site Thaneti. And below the stones, but there were only few vessels. And here also means in some cases the bangles were there, and very small burials, means 1.9 meter to 1.3 meter in size. Some burials were there, and there were double chambered burials. Here you can see like this. And in double chamber also means they made some partition kind of thing, and means sometimes and in this case there is a later addition you can see. That was another burial they constructed, and due to that one side is broken. Then due to the pressure within the soil, means one burial got actually squeezed like in the center. Here you can see this one. This is actually the means kind of related to site formation. And then in some graves, means or in some pits, you can see over there were some stones, and when we removed that stones, we were able to see only some vessels. And human burial, one of the human skeletal remains are found without any indicators, and it is almost complete, and it was associated with 3 vessels, and it is identified as a middle-aged man. And another human skeleton, in this case, you can see the bones are highly damaged, because the soil content is the soil is very acidic at the site. Another human skeleton associated with vessels. Here means at the site, in all the burials, wherever we got the skeletal remains, the vessels were mainly found towards the leg portion. And only we got very few charred bones from there, from the site, but none of them were from any proper grave or means any pits. They were from while excavating, we got some charred bones. They have the warping marks. Then some human bones were found even in a vessel associated with the burial. We got some human bones. Actually, probably that might have happened after the burial. Then in one of the burial structures, we can see vessels inside the structure, because it looks like the structure might have made later after this burial. Then in one of the graves, we were able to find two skulls together, and now means the materials are studied by Dr. Veena Mushraf, and she is able to identify more double burials at the site, and more studies are happening now, and means only after studies we can publish the data. Another interesting feature is a cattle skeleton found in a grave, but right now means we are not very sure about the means exact time period. Means anyway, it belongs to means very old time period, but we are, because it is the bones are highly damaged condition. But still means we are means now many studies are going on, and the means also we are trying to date the sample. Once we get the data only we can say the exact time period. Is it belong to early Harappan, urban Harappan, or late Harappan? That we need to make sure. And in the Neolithic context, from Mergar, along with the burials, the sheep, or means the lamb bone, sometimes 6 lambs were brought along with the human burial. That was in the period 1-8 Mehergar. But in Harappan context, usually the animal burials are not found. Then along with these burials, we can see even some shell bangles, and some of the same kind of these grooved shell bangles are more similar to the shell bangles of the early Harappan time period at Shahi Tumb, and means it connects more to the Namaska and those kind of sites. Here, in some cases, 24 bangles were found. The size of these shell bangles were also varying. And now we need to understand that the kind of these shell bangles were going from Gujarat to Kachri, means other areas of Balochistan or Central Asia, or means they were coming from that area. So more studies are needed now, and Professor Kenawari is now studying these materials. And also along with this thing, there were shell beads were there. In 2 burials, we were able to find shell beads, and in 1 burial, there were 2 lapis lazuli beads. Then none of the graves at the site revealed any of the stones. From the surface of the site, there were in the cemetery, we were able to recover a large number of stone, mainly chalcolithic blades of chalcedony, and some lithic debitage also. 1 raw featured blade got from the site. And right now is from all possibility, it looks like that probably the area was earlier using for blade production, and later it was converted for converted as a cemetery. There is a possibility, but otherwise also there is also a chance. There is also a chance that after using it as a cemetery, they might have used this too. Then some portions from the surface of the site, only very few portions we got from the surface, and 2 of the portraits have graffiti, and 3-4 grinding stones were also got from the site. Now, also we are not very sure about the where is the exact habitation site. So now we are trying to locate that. We were trying to locate that thing, and we were able to identify a site known as Lakhapar, 1.5 kilometers away from their place. Another site known as Pardabed, and another Tajagad. And is in that Lakhapar has more similarity now, means more similarities to the materials from Junakatia, and also the site Pardabed has some similarity to some of the materials from the site. The similar kind of nature was also observed at the site Dhaneti. There also they were not able to find the habitation site. Next comes research slipware that can be dated from 3200 to 1900 BC. Research slipware mainly find in the Kutch region, and earliest research slipware are getting from the sites like Junakatia and Dhaneti, and it can be dated to 3200 or 3002. And it is in when we look into these materials in the classical Harappan period, the quality of this material pottery is much better compared to the early Harappan phase. So some of the vessels are looking more close to the or more glacier variety like the early Harappan, so classical Harappan, but they are very thin and fragile compared to the classical Harappan, the research slipware of classical Harappan type. And this can be dated from dated up to 1900 BC, and after 1900 BC we are not getting any research slipware. And these are some of the shapes and bottles mainly in the sites like Kirsara, Sokotada, we are getting these pottery in high number. Another regional chalcolithic ceramic tradition is Gujarat is known as micaceous redware. It is mainly found in the Bhal region of Gujarat. And in this area, around 32 sites are located. And this ceramics and Lothal is the site which yielded the earliest micaceous redware, where means from the earliest levels we are getting this pottery. And also the nearby sites are also yielding this kind of pottery. And this pottery it is more associated with Sorath Harappan vessels, and majority of the vessels have similarity to the Sorath Harappan vessel types. And then when it comes to the classical Harappan period, we have in many of the sites though we are calling as classical Harappan sites, they have the regional trades, and they have some have very limited amount of classical Harappan trades, and some have good amount of trades. When you go to the sites like Kutch, there are more classical Harappan stuff we are getting. And when we look into the architectural features, we have sites like Dolar have tripartite division like Middle Town, Citadel, and Lower Town, and there is also cemetery. And certain sites have only Lower Town and Citadel. And in some sites there is fortification outside and inside, habitation inside and outside fortification, and there are small sites without any fortification or anything. And there were big fortifications and gateways we can see at Gujarat, and there were drainage system, including the covered one like in the Dholavira. Water tanks we can see there. Then reservoirs, at Dholavira around 16 reservoirs are reported. Then wells are there in many sites like Hirsara, Lothal, Dholavira, etc. Then there is evidence for streets. Then houses are there, small houses and house complexes are there. And for the building materials, in many places they use stones. There were mud brick structures are there many, and very few burnt brick structures are there. And they also used, there were huts with post holes. Here you can see huts were also there. Then some pits were also used. Pits were mainly for trash deposition and those kind of purposes. While looking at the ceramics, the ceramics are there were trade ceramics like black slip jar, then handi kind of vessels, and also perforated jar and many vessels. And they were always, many times in Gujarat, they were found associated with Sorath Harappan vessels. And in many sites, Sorath Harappan vessels are misrepresented as classical Harappan ceramics. And when you look at the transportation system, we are not getting exact cart frames or those kind of things, but we are getting the toy cart frames, toy cart frames and the spoked wheel frames. All are of the toy types, and from that we can infer that they were using carts. Bullock carts are also different styles, like solid chase bullock carts are there, so hollow chases bullock carts are there. Then also from the side Lothal, a model of a boat is also got. So it also shows that there were water transport system was there, and there were humans were also represented in many ways, but in many cases the representation of human body was not rendered in very good way. And also while looking at the seals, Dr. Gregg Jamison was talking very detailed about the seals, and from Gujarat, many sites yielded seals, and some of them were with a single animal, sometimes multiple headed animals, some having plant representation of geometric designs or floral decorations, and one unique seal from Bagasra has a pocket kind of thing within the seal. And also seals impressions were also found, also found there, and they are usually known as sealings. Then about the writing, we have evidence for scripts in the form of the so-called signboard from Dholavira, the painted script from the site Bagasra, then also painted script from Shikarpur, Surkotada, and also graffiti form from the site Bagasra. The weights of many shapes were also mainly cubical chet weights were found. Then while talking about the ornaments, there are gold ornaments were there, and gold objects, including the Kashmala kind of thing, were got from the sites. There were silver ornaments and silver objects got from the site Dolavira. The lead objects were there. Then copper or bronze objects were there. Mainly chisels and knives and those kind of things. And also fish hooks were there. Then from the side Bagasra, a very unique knife got, it has a handle of bone, and how they stick the bone still is an enigma. And also from the side Lothal, in copper ingot got. Actually, this is an ingot. There is once you he melt it, you can transform it into tools. Then another material got from the getting from the sites in Gujarat is fans. Fans is actually it is mainly used to replicate the things in other materials. Then amulets or games were got from sites. Then large number of drill bits. It clearly indicates that stone bead productions. Then bead polishes were also got from the classical Harappan periods. Variety of beads in different materials: carnelian, bloodstone, lapis lazuli, and some of them are coming from very distant places like Badakhshan, and some of them were from the local or nearby area. And here some of the materials are shown here. Different varieties from the steatite to bloodstone. Then while coming to even the classical Harappan period, we are getting both blades of Rohichet blade at Rohichet and also of locally made chalstone. Then stone vessels were also got, stone dishes and those kind of things, and architectural parts, that means column bases, grinding stones, hammer stones, and all these things are associated with food processing or even industrial activities. Then variety of shell objects, including bangles, then beads, inlays, and architectural models, then triangular cakes, terracotta, then various objects of terracotta, including beads, bangles, then especially the stoneware bangle, that is very important during the Harappan period and probably used by the elite community. That is what the scholars say, because of the making technique, and also bone objects, including bone points, bone staff, and then definitely there is evidence for the use of domesticated and wild animals as food. Then shells, they used the shells as food. Then even fishes were used, and here you can see a large number of otoliths got from the sites. They clearly indicate their food habits. And from the otoliths, it was possible to identify many of the fish species they used. And mainly in the pre-urban Harappan period or early Harappan period, they were mainly using millet-based food, and then gradually more wheat and wheat-based food, and then gradually again shifting to millet in the late phase is noticed, and large number of studies associated with the phytoliths, and then starch analysis clearly shows these changes. Now, looking the Sorat and late Sorat Harappan period, that is from 2600 to 1600 BC. And here means now, when we look in the Harappan structures, they are more like in square or rectangular in shape. Here it comes to like curvilinear or polygonal in shape. And they are mainly not only confined to the Saurashtra region. It is there in Saurashtra. It was almost towards South Gujarat. Some we can see North Gujarat, and few are there in the Kutch region also. And here there were circular structures, and the vessels were also changing. Here you can see many of the black and red were kind of vessels earlier we found, and also the micaceous red were vessel. Similar varieties we are getting in Sorat Harappan, and Sorat Harappan in the period between 2600 to 1900, its shapes were more like concave, convex, and when it come to 1900 to 1600, it became more like concave, and also stud handles of the Sorat Harappan vessels in the urban phase is more shorter, and when it come to late Harappan phase, it become much longer. These are some of the vessels we are getting. Here you can see. And there were also getting some stone tools. but means Rohritat is absent. Then some molds were there. There is definitely evidence for copper working. Then there were beads, but the length the beads were very smaller in nature, and also means there were more use of terracotta objects like spindle wheels were much higher at the sites like Jadak. Then some shell large in some sites we got some shell beads. Even the shell, though we are getting some shell bangles, they are totally devoid of any chevron mark, which is very unique to the classical Harappans. And then comes Prabhasware. Prabhasware is a ceramic type usually found in the mainly in the Jamnagar region, and here this pottery is also very much similar to the Prabhas pottery is also very much similar to the classical Soratha Harappan ceramics. Here only the difference is that the painting pattern and the color of the paint. Here more like a purple kind of painting, and they were mainly found in registers. These are some of the pottery got from the sites. And this pottery, it extends up to the late Harappan phase. Then come Leicester studware. Leicester studware, though this pottery has a Leicester kind of appearance, but this pottery means it is, the making of this pottery is very, not of very good quality compared to the Michael studware or anything. And in this, you can see, we can find large representation, large number of deer kind of animals. And then comes Malwa ware. There is a pottery mainly found in the southern Gujarat region, and this pottery can be dated from 1700 to 1500 BC, and it is only reported from 3 sites, and only 2 sets, 3 sets like that. It is from Joka, that was actually around 1600 BC, and even lesser goes up to 1300. After that, very limited amount for the chalcolithic evidence here we are getting. And then comes, these are some of the Malwa events. Malwa ware got from other parts, and just to show the shapes. Then the Jorwe ware also got from only 3 sites like Nagal, Joka, and Malwa. So around 1000 BC, we are this also means we are just roughly putting the time period, and we don't have any C14 dates. So around 1000 BC, all evidence for the Jorwe means the regional cultures or that Harappan is getting away in Gujarat. And these are some more shapes. So with this, I am stopping my presentation. Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. Can you switch the share off so that we can Yes.
Yes.
So there are many questions. In fact, one person has been basically bombarding with a lot of questions. I think he's bubbling with a lot of.
Okay.
I will ask some of those questions, and then I will come to some of my own questions, and I'm sure Gauri has.
Yeah, I have some, definitely.
Somebody with the name Agni. One is a very fundamental question that I would also like to know. How do you differentiate Mesolithic and Chalcolithic structures?
So in Gujarat, we are not getting any of the structures of the Mesolithic period. That's the first thing. So we don't have any structures of the Mesolithic period.
So everything.
Here means whatever structures we are getting is from the Chalcolithic period. And also from the Chalcolithic period, even the other sites like Loteshwar, we are not getting any structures. Even at the Chalcolithic period, we are getting only pits of that period.
Okay.
Yeah, that leads to the next question I have. Like Juna, Gatia and all are only burial grounds because there is nothing else there?
No, at their site only there is a very big cemetery. Even the site, the Dhaneti, there is also a cemetery site only.
So where were they bringing people to bury them here? Like there must be some...
there is a big question. So for that means at the Dhaneti region, Dr. Ajit Prasad and his team surveyed for around the 4 years, and they were not able to locate a single site. And that is mainly because that area is nowadays highly utilized for mining activities also. That might be one reason. And in our case, we were able to locate in the first one season, we were not able to find a single site. Now we were able to locate around 4 small sites. Like I mentioned Lakapar, Pardabad, then the site known as what is Dojagat and these sites. But here the problem is that when we talk to the villages, there is a small nala near to the burial place, and there was a tradition of villages of seven villages used to come to cremate their bodies in that nala. And another thing is that the farthest village was almost 30 kilometers away. So that in that way, if we think in that way, probably there is a chance of chance that this burial ground might belong to different villages. Or that is one possibility, and it might be over there is a more because we are not getting any of the sites in this size, because the size of Lakapar is less than 100 by 100 meter. The size of site of Pardabad is less than 100 by 100 meter, and even Dojagat is 60 by 60 meter. So but this is a very huge burial ground, and also within this burial ground, in locality wise, there is a change in the what is the kind of burial goods they use. There is also some and also the direction of the burials are also different.
Okay.
Sizes, pattern, everything is different, no?
Yeah, there are many different things. Yeah.
There's one question that is related to that, particularly on the burials, that Pradosh Biswas asks: if so many human bones were found in Gujarat, can't DNA have been extracted from a single one of them? We could have DNA profiles of multiple ancient Indians instead of the single Rakigadi female, which refers to the famous results obtained from Rakigadi female.
Okay. So now about these sites, even we have very limited. First of all, we have very limited number of human skeletons of these sites. I am also excavated 197 graves. Within that, we were able to get one full skeleton. I have shown some skeleton. One is without any head, and somehow very limited this thing. And also we are trying our level best to get the DNA, extract the DNA. But due to the acidic nature of the soil, the preservation of collagen in these bones are very less, almost nil. So
okay.
even we are facing a lot of issues. So we are trying to do a lot of analysis, and a team, a team of scholars from different parts of India and world are working on these materials. Even for dating these materials also become very big issue, because we are not getting collagen from these materials.
So there are same question asked by two different people. One is Agni, who has multiple questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Also Omar Khan, which is about can we guess as to the population of the region during this period? That's Omar Khan's question. And Agni's question is, what is the size of the population that these towns and cities possibly supported?
Actually, the kind of the demographic reconstruction, which is almost impossible. Here and majority of the, and even right now we are not very sure how many sites were there, because even each and every exploration we are getting new sites. So right now we are not, so the calculating the population of the region is almost like very difficult. For example, recently in one publication, newspaper, I have seen that in a small site having a size of around 100 meter by 100 meters, somebody was proposing that there were about population of about 4,000 people at that area. So for me that kind of for us, based on the current evidence, it is impossible to predict the population, or to say about the demography is a very difficult thing.
Okay, but from the excavation of or a guess of the number of streets, number of houses, can we not project that each housing unit could have only supported 4, 5, 6 people, and at least come up with the see, you are at the end of the day projecting a certain size of the township.
Yeah.
Right? You have so the living quarters are easily something that can be estimated.
That is also a big issue, because what I found is that when you look in the villages in Gujarat, certain houses are there only, even in a small room, there are only 2 or 3 people. Certain places 20 people are coming from one small thing. So it is like, so these kind of wild guesses are very difficult to do, and also the chance of using one house in different multiple times is also there. means because one generation, second generation, third generation that is there, and also so these kind of I can make assumptions, but that doesn't make give much that sense.
No,
Yeah,
it's only an assumption or a
that
conjecture which cannot be proven in any manner.
that is
But we may not be able to predict the population across a civilization, but just Lothal or just Tolavira, approximately what could have been the population.
Madam, there is one second. Because the same site, for example, Dholavira is a site means populated from 3,500 to 1,600 BC. When it's 1,600 BC, almost 2,000 years or 2,500 year people lived there. We excavated only 10% of the site. And we know, and many places of them, and based on that, making the prediction service almost like there will be absolute nonsenses.
Okay. So there's another question from Agni on these burials. It's fascinating to see animals buried as well. How many such animal burials were found in IVC in total? What is the likely reason why they might have been buried? Were they buried along with the humans, next to the humans, or sort of independently?
And also here while talking about this the animal burial, I told that this is only one cattle burial we got in the whole Indus, like in a structure. Okay, though recently at Rakikadi there is a mention about a human animal burial, but there is only the animal, but they are not associated with any human skeleton. And it means I showed one burial from Mehergar, but that belonged to the Neolithic period. There have been some goat, 6 goats were buried along with the human. So here these kind of burials, why they buried, that's a big question I have to answer now. Because I got this burial from there, but for that I need to now identify the sex of the animal. I also I am trying to get the date of the animal. Is it later? I am trying to get my level best to get the dates. Already 4 to 5 samples tried, and we failed very miserably because of the lack of collagen in the bones. So once we get only, we can say okay, something about, and also is it pet? If they buried in that time, it might be a pet, or it might be an animal of great importance to them, probably, and for the people who were using them. And also in this burial, we are not getting any kind of cut marks or anything in the, at least in the neck portion, there is no cut marks or anything. So we can't say that
it's not a ritualistic.
No, we are not getting such kind of things, because Dr. Abhayan, who is an expert in zooarchaeology, he was excavating that whole burial. So he and his students, so they were not able to find any cut marks or anything. We documented each and every stage there. So without so here right now I can just say that it is an animal burial there. So what was the importance of that? I have no idea. Right.
Okay. Then you mentioned about these 7 villages, and G. Francis Theratil says 7 villages use the same Nala even nowadays.
Yes. They were 30 years before. Last was up to 30 years before. Now only from the nearby village, Khatia, only the people coming there.
Okay. So his projection there is, is it that these villages got separated from the same village previously, to whom this Nala belongs?
Nala actually it is a rivulet. Rivulet means it has water. Okay. So it doesn't belong to any particular person. It was there, and the villages were sprang up in the border. Probably they might be these. We ask the villagers, they can't connect each other, because right now they belong to different castes. So it is difficult.
Yeah. Also, the memory of 4,000 years or 3,000 years, whether it will carry through all the way, it's very difficult to say.
Yeah, it is. We are not sure. I have just said that it is a possibility. I am not saying that they were they were using it in the same pattern. That is one possibility. I said it might be completely wrong.
Right. There's a question from Shikha Sharma. Please elaborate on the differentiating markers to the urban Harappan and Sorat Harappan ceramics.
Oh, it is the most difficult thing. Right now, ceramics here certain things very easily, for a means layman, I can say that this, if you find means a Harappan handi kind of vessel, that is a classical Harappan vessel. Okay. If it is Harappan handi, there is a classical. If you are getting a black slip jar, there is a classical Harappan thing. And for example, for the bowls and means, because if you look into means it is actually the ceramic class, it will take at least 6 months. Means rigorous class to at least understand the ceramics, because it is widely means studied. But means for a Sorat Harappan, I can say, like, if you are getting a convex sided bowl, that is typically belonging to the classical Harappan phase of Sorat Harappan. Okay, there is a Sorat Harappan pottery. It is a concave sided bowl. There is a late Sorat Harappan. So in this way, certain vessels we can clearly differentiate. And if you are getting a typical nail-headed dish or basin with nail-headed trim, you can call it as classical Harappan. Okay, so
And
it is like
she's also looking for some reading references.
Definitely,
on this material.
yeah, because there are many publications by Dr. My teacher, Dr. Ajit Prasad, and his publication and so on, mainly his excavation reports on excavations, and also his work on JDAC or PTHED, and means his students work on that thing, and my recent publications on many Sorat Harappan sites. So she can definitely, and also means definitely the works of Professor Dr. S.R. Rao and Gregory Posel and Posel and Ravel. So the site Raujidi, and they are very, very helpful.
I had one more question. See, you showed so many pottery styles, no? Some of them are restricted to only one site, whereas some of them are widespread, is it?
Now, only means the pre-Prabha ceramic is only restricted to 3 sites. Other sites I showed like Malwa, where Jol, they in the southern Gujarat, they are only in 3 sites. They are in the central India, they are getting in many sites. Okay. And also means the others are like means 30 sites, 75 sites. But means but one thing is that they have certain differences. But means now we should look into their similarities also. There are certain similarities. They are means
so broadly they belong to a particular style, even though there may be variations.
Because they have means within that there are variations, but there are similarities also. We need to find that similarities, because when you means if you make them in different compartments, definitely we can put in different compartments. So if you want to connect them, there are certain features. Actually, we are working on those aspects now.
Another thing, you seem to have found a lot more pottery in the burial than the habitable sites, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, means in the burials, the condition of preservation is much higher, because it is a pit. They dug a pit, and where they keep the full vessels, and then they fill that thing. Well, in the habitation kinds, what happens? Always a chance of breakages, and when you mean, so if you even shift a place, you won't leave the best things. You will carry with that.
Oh,
right. That's interesting. So the other, your larger thesis, you have taken the Gujarat region.
Yes.
Right? But one can do a similar study in, let's say, Rajasthan, and we keep moving to the Punjab region, the Sindh region. So effectively, would you say that there is something really special about the Gujarat region vis-a-vis any of the other regions?
No, all regions are very important. We need to actually understand all these regions separately, because when we are in a stage, because our problem is that we have certain limitations. We can move up to the one area in our lifetime. So here means we need to actually compare the materials with other areas. We need to study the other materials, because now means we have only the knowledge of the materials from Gujarat. The people from Haryana have the knowledge of the materials from Haryana only. The people from Punjab have the same. It's the same case with the Pakistan. So only things what we are seeing is only the photographs. We are just comparing with them. So now means I showed many ceramic traditions or ceramic varieties of this region. Probably they might be belonging to that area also. So actually we need to focus more on now it should become we should actually cut the borders.
Right. So just couple of other questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Even this came up yesterday. We were trying to find out what was the size of the bangles, right? And today Amolika asked the same question. What is its size? Because in a sense, if we know the size of the bangles, we can project possibly the gate, the height, and various. I mean, it's again a projection.
Definitely,
It will be a reasonable projection. Do
Yeah.
we have any statistical work on that, including the average height and weight of IVC person, male, female?
Not much studies are done on that level, but means regarding the bangles, means we have means say some of them are 6 centimeter diameter, some have 7 centimeter diameter. It is pretty good for means women's hand and means or means adults hand. Even there are means 3 centimeter, 3 to 4 3 centimeter diameter bangles were also there. Used to be
Probably
and even from some of the skeletons, they have the size of around modern man's size, means 5.5 feet, and even the one complete skeleton from our side means that is Junakati is around 5.5 feet in size.
Okay.
Yeah. So
but we do get this, fairly modern statistics that if you take, the United States of America, over 100 years, the average height and weight have gotten increased because of much better nutrition.
Yes.
Now, if you just project back to the IVC region on 4,000, 5,000 years back, how is it that their height and weight is more or less the same? And, what can we interpret from that, if at all?
Sir, the problem is that we have only excavated 20 burial sites. Okay. I will just, in Gujarat case, I will tell.
Okay.
Even in that, I am just saying about the Junakati is the maximum excavated site in Gujarat. There we got one complete skeleton. Okay. Rest of the skeletons are very bad condition. And at the site Lothal, they have maximum from 2 faces, they have 23 burials.
Okay.
From Dolavira, they got 2 or 3 burials. The 2 burials, complete burials. Rest of means then Daneti they have means they are also in very bad condition, like the other side, 1 or 2 skeletons, but not complete. So and from this it is very difficult to make the kind of means the amount of skeletons are very less in our hand. So
I understand.
One thing we can say is the kind of skeletons or they are only specific to that site only right now. That will be the better thing. Or means whatever we are getting, because that is only specific to that means that grave or means that thing. That is the right thing right now.
In a sense, in this connection, there is another question from Agni, where the Daniti and Santri skeletal remains dated. Do we know the rough dating of that?
They are between 3,200 to 2,600 BC. Very means 3,200 to 2,600 BC. That is the pre-Harappan Harappan phase. Pre-Harappan. Yeah. Even the burial from Junakatiya is also from the same period. The burials from Nagwada, they all belong to they all will be in between 3,200 to 2,600 BC.
Okay. Fine. Wonderful. One last question again, I think it's from Haripriya. What could possibly be the reason why the pots were placed around the feet in burials?
Oh, that might be some kind of a tradition or
just
some
an offering.
Because why I am saying, because in the if you look into the burial, one of the burial I showed from Surkotada, there means that was not kept near the leg, that was kept near the ankle and also means near the head portion. And if you look into the burials from Haryana region, many of them are head, in the classical Harappan period, many of them were kept near head. Okay, so it also means from the side, similar kind of pre-urban Harappan pottery from the side Vaharvo Timbo, if you look, they were kept near the head. So,
in fact, I was going to say that the skeletons are not laid in the same position itself. No? Not all of them are supine. You should show one of them
even some for us means even now means when we look at the materials, if we look at the photographs also, we can see that some of them looks like disarticulated and those kind of things.
Sideways
and even secondary kind of burials are also possible there. But right now means if you go to the in the Sindh region, those kind of burial or means sites like Harappa, those kind of burials are they were mainly using the complete primary burials. So there are a lot of issues we need to actually answer now.
Wonderful. Gauri, there are not
You
many
want to
more
ask anything more?
we can find. Thank you,
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh.
Rajesh. It
Oh,
was
thanks,
really
Thank you
wonderful.
so
thanks,
much.
thanks a
Thank you
lot.
so
Thanks a
much.
lot.
That was really a
For
wonderful
us,
lecture.
every talk, and now it's like 6 over. There's so much of new material. It's it's lifetime work for each one of you.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to put a structure around it and assimilate it. There's just so much of new information, really.
Yeah. In fact, I was just saying
Right.
that they have a lot of common research material. If you see their maps, they are common. Or for example, he had so many pictures from Ajit Prasad. But for us, everything looks new. Like every presentation looks new, even though I mean, you are obviously having common
Also,
references,
the
but
way of seeing it, right?
Yeah.
So each
Yeah.
one is seeing it from slightly different
Yeah.
direction,
Yeah.
and that's so much of research waiting to happen already,
Yeah.
and so much has already happened, and we're still, trying to figure out so much more. I mean, so much that we don't know, even after
Yeah,
all
and in
this.
fact, as the earlier speaker was saying, now only they are thinking of writing a comprehensive book on Indus fields,
Seals,
so.
and,
Right,
and
right.
and that's the beauty of the Indus civilization, no?
Yeah,
Because the
so.
script is undeciphered, so means still you have more scope for imagination, and
Yeah.
means you have more scope for means more new thought process, and then it's really interesting.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
thanks a lot, man. Thanks a lot, sir.
Over to you,
Thank you.
Dr.
Yeah, thank you.
for further information.
Yeah, that was a wonderful lecture. And with that, we come to the end of day 3. Tomorrow, we have 2 wonderful lectures lined up for us. First, we have What's on the Menu? Food and Agriculture of Harappan Times by Dr. Jennifer Bates. And then we have Family and Kinship in Harappan Times by Dr. Brad Chase. For all those people who may have missed any of the 6 lectures, either in part or fully, kindly log into our YouTube channel and you will be able to hear them. Thank you so much to all of you and our wonderful speakers. Thank you. Hoping to see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.